Time and temperature sponsored by Cure Auto Insurance. Drive well.
Tragedy on the track. 2 racehorses die as horrified spectators look on. Today we discuss what's being done to keep future thoroughbreds and their jockeys safe.
And he's gone by to take the lead.
Plus, will you ever have the money to retire? A startling study finds many in our area must choose between working much longer or living in poverty. And finally, community empowerment. The Urban League of Philadelphia expands its reach.
NBC 10 at Issue starts now.
Good morning. I'm Rosemary Connors for NBC 10 at Issue. 2 down and 1 more to go when it comes to the biggest thoroughbred horse races of the year. The last leg of the Triple Crown, the Belmont Stakes, is in 2 weeks, and this year's quest for the coveted crown has taken a few hits.
And Nyquist is still unbeaten. He has won the Kentucky Derby.
Nyquist won the Kentucky Derby, but placed 3rd in the Preakness behind Exaggerator and 2nd place finisher Cherry Wine. Now the colt has been pulled from the Belmont Stakes because of a fever he developed after the race. Leading up to the Preakness, 2 horses running in earlier undercard races died. A 9-year-old colt collapsed shortly after winning a race, and a 4-year-old filly named Permitia was euthanized on the track after breaking a bone in her leg. The horse was owned by Roy and Gretchen Jackson from Chester County. In a tragic coincidence, their other horse, Barbaro, shattered bones in his right hind leg just after the start of the Preakness back in 2006. Barbaro survived surgery but was euthanized months later after developing a painful hoof disease. At the time, Barbaro's plight gained worldwide attention. Immediately after this year's Preakness, the animal rights group PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, demanded answers. On Twitter, the group wrote, calling on owners to release veterinary records and complete list of medications that horses were administered before Preakness races. Studies and our investigations show most breakdowns and deaths occur because horses have pre-existing injuries masked by excessive use of medications. Again, that's from PETA. In a news release, the Humane Society's president has said, quote, deaths of horses at the track have been routine, and they are a grim reminder that this is a very poorly regulated industry with widespread doping of horses, end quote. This morning, I'm joined by 3 people with close ties to horse racing. Dr. Scott Palmer, a veterinarian who is the equine medical director in New York, responsible for the safety and welfare of horses in the state. Alan Foreman, the chairman of the National Thoroughbred Horsemen's Association, and Sal DeBunda, the president of the Pennsylvania Thoroughbred Horsemen's Association. Thank you all for being with us this morning.
Glad to be here.
So let's begin with Dr. Palmer and Alan. You both co-authored a task force report. It was about 21 horse deaths at a track in New York. What did you learn? What did you find?
Well, we were commissioned by Governor Andrew Cuomo at the time to look into the injuries at Aqueduct Racetrack, and we conducted a 5-month investigation. And we interviewed hundreds of individuals. We hired scientists to review reams of data. And after we had examined all the factors that contributed to these horses' injuries, we felt as though that there were many causes. There's not one single cause that causes this type of problem. And we felt, though, that most importantly, we felt that there in at least half of those cases, there were opportunities for missed interventions. And so we made a number of sweeping recommendations that have been carried out in New York. Interestingly, when that happened in 2012, the fatality rate at the time of the aqueduct injuries was twice the national average.
Wow.
And then we implemented these recommendations in 2013, and the injury went from being twice the national average to half the national average in 1 year.
What kind of recommendations are we talking about?
Well, we're talking about pre-race examinations, medication recommendations, and the kinds of things that support the safety, integrity, and welfare of racing, particularly with respect to the welfare of the horse and the rider on the horse. And I think that one of the things that we concluded was the allegations by PETA, and they lodge these allegations every time there is a public fatality. I think we pretty much debunked those allegations, and there was not widespread drugging, or we certainly saw missed opportunities. And I think we're learning from that experience, and our recommendations are being adopted in racing throughout the country, and we have brought the fatality rate down. I would just like to say, with respect to the incidents at Pimlico on Saturday, which were unfortunate, they're always unfortunate. with both owners, and particularly with the Jacksons, given the coincidence of having another horse. But those two incidents are being investigated. We will receive the veterinary records. We will look at the medication records, and we'll have an answer for the public as to what happened. We believe we can get to the bottom.
And I would add that here at Parks, I represent the horsemen at Parks Racetrack. We've seen the study. We've tried to implement as many of those as we were able to. We recently hired a safety coordinator whose full-time job is to work with the track condition, the horsemen there, to make sure so we've taken this very seriously here in Pennsylvania.
Is part of this that with any sport there are risks involved, and that this is the reality of it? Well,
that's a very good question. I take umbrage with the concept that some people say that this is simply a cost of doing business. And I disagree with that. You know, I think our record in New York in the last 4 years speaks for itself. We've saved horses' lives by implementing these changes that we've done. And I think the core concept here is what we've done in a summary is we've put together a evolving quality control program where we investigate circumstances and identify circumstances that cause these injuries. We design interventions, we implement those interventions, and then we test those interventions. And then we reevaluate if we need to change those interventions or make new ones. We do that. So it's an ongoing process. Job of safety is never done. And we really care about these horses, and I think we honor the lives of the ones that die by dedicating our efforts to preventing these things in the future. And that's a critically important concept, that this is something that we work at all the time, and it's a journey. It's not something that you just do it and it's done.
These animals are bred to race. That's their purpose. And they receive extraordinary veterinary care. And it's the kind of veterinary care that you would expect of any animal. We are very vigilant with respect to the treatment of these animals and the manner in which they perform. And I think, as Scott said, we're never happy about the fact that there is a fatality, and we do everything that we can to prevent it. It's unfortunate that on Saturday we had incidents on one of the biggest days of the year. There were unfortunate incidents, and we'll try to learn from it.
As horsemen, our primary responsibility is to the jockey and the horse, to keep them as healthy as possible. That's the primary thing. Look, we all love to win races. We all like to enjoy the sport. But the main thing to us is to make sure that jockey and that horse are as safe as possible when they go out to that track. And that's our biggest concern.
Dr. Palmer, you also treated Barbaro after his injuries. If you can, I think talk to us about euthanization. The public, when they see these horses go down and they're euthanized rather immediately, that wasn't the case in terms of Barbaro's situation, but they see it happen so quickly, and I think people may wonder why is the decision so quick? Is it that treatment is too difficult? How do you come to that conclusion?
It depends on the type of the injury. It's a triage function that occurs on the racetrack when an injury like that happens, and the veterinarians immediately on site make a determination about, first of all, is the injury life-threatening? Second of all, given the circumstances of the injury, what would the prognosis be for treatment?
So, for example, if it's a leg injury, which is what you're typically seeing, could the horse really put weight on the leg? Is that part of it?
That's part of it. The horse, there are a number of very rigid criteria for repairing fractures in horses, and one of them is if the wound is already contaminated or if the degree of injury is so extensive that the surgical opportunities to fix it are just not practical or possible, then it's necessary to perform humane euthanasia.
And that's why it's done so quickly, as opposed to waiting and...
Why put the horse through a difficult time, a painful, difficult time, unless there's a reason that maybe there's a good chance to save his life? For example, with Barbaro, as terrible as that injury was, the injury was closed, meaning that there were no bones through the skin. The fractures were fixable. It was possible. And that horse was handling himself in a way, most horses can be very upset with a circumstance like that. Barbaro was very calm. He seemed to be a good patient. And so we never even talked about euthanizing Barbaro at the time.
Besides the safety of the races, there's also, what do you do with the horses when they're no longer able to run?
Right.
And I really think that's an important thing to mention here, and to have this opportunity, because when in 2007 they prohibited the killing of horses in the United States. Doesn't mean they weren't being shipped to Canada or to Mexico. And efforts have now begun in Pennsylvania, and other states have adopted it, where we will take a horse that's been at the track with no charge to the owner, take it, we'll have it vetted and find a home for it. And I think that even at parks alone, we've saved over 1,800 horses in the 7 years we've been in existence. And we now, I think, are the #1 rescue. There's others that are, as I said, Maryland has it, Penn National has it.
After their careers are over.
After their careers are over. So it's not, because before, as an owner, I've been an owner for a long time, I used to wonder what would happen to my horse if it couldn't run anymore. I tried to find homes for it, but it was difficult. But I think the effort that's been made by the horse industry throughout the United States, but especially in the Mid-Atlantic area, to save horses when they no longer can run, when they don't have a useful purpose, has been phenomenal. I think it's just spreading throughout the country, and I think that should not be ignored, because it's safety on the track, but what do you do about these horses when they no longer can run?
Afterward, the next chapter.
Yeah.
Dr. Palmer, before we go, one last thought. Obviously, we're approaching the Belmont Stakes, as we had mentioned at the top of our interview, and Nyquist not running. We know he has a fever. I think the last thing I read recently was low white blood cell count. Fill us in. What is this serious? What does this mean?
Well, I don't think we have enough information to indicate whether it's serious or not, Rosemary, but I believe that I applaud the decision on the part of the owners and the trainer to scratch the horse from the race, because this is the horse's health is a top priority. And this horse will be fine sometime again to race later in the year. We've got a lot of racing coming up this summer, a lot of exciting racing in New York and Saratoga, and in the fall at Belmont, and he'll be hopefully healthy and be able to compete in those races. So it's a great example of how a horse owner and a horse trainer has taken the steps to protect the health of the horse, even though he stood an opportunity to enter in a race where there was a lot of money at stake. So it's not always about the money.
Dr. Scott Palmer, Alan Foreman, and Sal DeBunda, thanks so much for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you
for having us.